And really the hardest part is just showing up. It's just showing up. I mean, break it down into little parts. If you want to get yourself motivated, don't think about necessarily going through the entire program. Just break it down into steps. I mean, you know that that's exactly how the journey of 1,000 miles starts, is with one step. So the hardest part of working out, for example, is just getting through the doors of the gym. I mean, don't you agree? Like, if you're somebody that exercises at a gym or something you want to do, or maybe you don't, or you can't get yourself maybe to do that, isn't the hardest part just getting this, you're getting dressed, putting on your sneakers, going out and getting to the gym and just walking through the front door? Because I guarantee you, once you walk through the front door, you're going to work out, right? So just, I would say, if you want to be motivated to continue this program or go back and refresh, go through it and learn more, then I would say this. I would say turn on your computer, log in, and click start and join us. And just journey of 1,000 miles is one step. And I would also say it's worth it. It really is worth it, because there are a lot of skills that you can learn out there. And I'm honored that you chose a lot of the quick learning skills to kind of be engaged with. And I think reading is one of those. If you're gonna break down like what's most important, and you want to spend time on the 80, I think everyone's familiar with the 80-20 rule, right? The 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle, is basically saying that 20% of all the actions you take are going to give you 80% of the results. And that 80-20 holds pretty steadfast in nature and in business, where you'll have 20% of your customers giving you 80% of the complaints, or it always breaks down very similarly. And I would say find out what that 20% is that's going to give you 80% of the rewards in life. And I think quick learning falls in that 20%. That if you could be a fast learner, you could have better focus, you could have a better memory, you could handle written information more quickly, then that's going to serve you in the long run, because you want to be able to major in the major things, right? Too many people major in minor things, and I'm guilty of this also, where we're spending time and we're getting really good at this stuff maybe that doesn't matter. People are spending time on the 80% of this stuff that's giving them 20% of the rewards, and that's probably not as efficient. And also for me, when I think about it, is it takes the stress off of life. When you're going through and you're making a to-do list, for example, and you're thinking about all the things you need to do, and there's probably 20% of the stuff on that list, for most people, that really they need to do. That if they do that, then that's going to move things forward. And so I would say that. And then, so I would acknowledge in this, and finishing up this question specifically, is remember your head, your heart, your hands. Make a decision. Associate yourself to the values that are most important to you and relate it directly to the outcome you want with this program or anything else. That reasons precede results. And just show up and break it down into one step at a time. Show up, get to the gym, get into the quick learning program. And once you're there, you'll go through it. And I would cap that with, it's worth it, the ability to be able to do that. And we could always be better. All of us could be better in these areas. Even myself, you could, always have better focus or better ability to read and everything. And, part of it is also the state that you're doing it in also. Like you could, people ask like, how fast somebody reads, and they could say 300 words a minute or 500 words a minute, 600. Some people say 1,000, some people say 200. It always varies, and it's not ever static, because it depends on what you're reading, right? If you're reading something, very light novel compared to something more technical, no one's going to read that exactly the same pace. But a quick reader or a quick learner has flexibility, because flexibility is power. The ability to have more options. It's not like you're going to play golf and just use one club. And also part of what's going to change with your reading speed, because I'm answering another question here that I know people have, is your state that you're reading it in. If you're tired or you're reading it at a different part of the day, some people get better results during different parts of the day. Some people ate a heavy meal and they're not going to read quite as fast, when they're practicing. Some people have 6 things on their mind, so they can't possibly read as fast as they could because they haven't closed those windows down inside their brain. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like you're on the computer, and even if you kind of minimize a lot of the windows of your browsers down, it's still using some of the processing power, even if you can't see it. So some people, they don't read as well, because not that they're not doing it right, it's just that their mind is still thinking about other stuff. Because according to George Miller, the study done at Harvard, your mind can focus on 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information at a time, which is maybe 5 to 11 bits. But after that's your conscious limit, according to that study. So again, I know some people might not be motivated, but it's putting themselves in the peak state. And when you're there, right? Don't, it makes, like, if you were to go to the gym and think about all the things you need to be doing and everything else, you can't possibly getting the same kind of workout that you would get if you're fully engaged. If you're there also when you're tired, or you just had a big meal, or you're certainly not going to get the same kind of results. Same thing with your mind and in your brain. So let's move on to the next question. This one says, loved your program. My reading skill has increased dramatically with novels way over 100%. Okay, congratulations, it's awesome. My technical reading is not as fast. Will that improve? Completely. So what I would say is, going back to technical reading, is you'll never read technical reading as fast as you'll read light reading, right? That's a given. And like, for example, I don't read or speak French. Right, so I can't, no matter how fast I could read English, I can't possibly, speed read something that I don't know anything about. Right, if I don't know, a specific subject, whether it's molecular biology or what have you, I can't speed read that, because you need what they call, schema. You need background information. You need requisite acumen in the specific subject, and maybe potentially some information, data, or experience. And so, but I would say is, if you understand the technical reading, you can boost your technical reading. It will never quite be as fast, obviously, as your light fiction reading, but you practice. Here's the distinction. It will improve, but you have to practice in the lighter reading. You have to practice in a lighter reading. If you could use your imagination right now and see, like, an S-curve, right? An S-curve on a chart where you're slowly increasing your reading speed, and it's going up and up, and it levels off, and then it goes up a little bit more, and it levels off, and it goes up more, and it levels off. That's generally how people progress, right? You can imagine as one symbol. And if let's say that you label that your light fiction reading, what your technical reading will be is metaphorically, imagine it's the same look, but it's just maybe a little bit, it's below your light fiction reading. All right, so it's kind of like your light fiction reading that you're practicing in kind of acts as, imagine like there's hooks on it, and as your light reading goes up faster and higher and better, so it helps to bring up and elevate your technical more reading. Because in order to be able to read faster in your fiction, then you have to have better focus. You have to be sub-vocalizing less, right? You have to have systems in your mind for comprehension, like we talked about in the reading program. And so all of that is gonna translate to better reading when the information is a little bit more difficult, right? But again, you can't read any faster than you can understand something. Otherwise, that would be skimming, and that's not what this program is about. So I would say is, yes, your technical reading is not going to be as fast, and it won't be for anybody's. And will it improve? It will improve, yes, by practicing in your lighter reading. And the reason why you practice in your lighter reading is so you could develop the necessary physical and mental skills to be able to read. Because if it's technical reading, imagine you're reading something technical, you'll never be able to go that quickly, because then you're always stopping to understand something. Does that make sense? Like, it's like you're reading a few words, you stop, you never get to develop the rhythm, you never get to develop the speed or feed your brain the comprehension. And so you train in the light fiction reading, and then the technical reading will improve, as long as you have the background of the technical reading. But then remember, the technical reading, the program that we went with quick reading, is not just about the speed. Remember everything we talked about comprehension, right? So that it was very involved. So that's why I encourage you to go back to the final session, session number 5 in the quick reading program, and I encourage you also to go through the review session, which you could call the bonus session number 6. Maybe you could call this one bonus 7. And so go through and really be a smart reader, because if you're a smarter reader, your speed's going to increase as a result, as a byproduct. Because if you can understand what you're reading better, if you're practicing everything that we talked about, in the comprehension areas, and you're mapping everything and you're relating it, and then everything else that was in the program, then you'll be able to read faster also. All right, I'm going to be finishing up here. I think we have another question though. It says, I know the rule of 21 days or more to make a habit. If we practice several times a week for months, will we get even quicker? Clever. Yes. So let me read that again. I know the rule of 21 days or more to make a habit. If we practice several times a week for months, will we get even quicker? And the answer is yes, because what you incentivize and what you practice will lead to progress, as long as you're doing it. Let me make the distinction. When you're practicing is kind of how, this is one way of looking at it. When you practice something, that's how you get to keep a skill, right? You get to keep it because you're making those connections, those neurological connections, and you're reinforcing it. But maybe you're not really growing the skill as much. And so exercise is how you're going to grow it. It's similar to if you go to the gym, as the metaphor that we've been using to continue on it. If you just go there and just kind of practice what you're doing, you get to kind of keep the muscle, but you won't grow the muscle unless you're pushing it beyond what it's comfortable with, if that makes any sense. So, unless you're exercising it, you're not going to grow it. But if you go in there and practice what you already know, and that's how you get to keep it, which is great. But then in order to grow it to the next level, you got to push yourself. So to answer your question, for those of you familiar with or subscribe to the Law of 21, you might have learned it in college or in psychology. They talked about if you want to be able to create a new habit, you practice it consistently for 21 days and 21 and 30 days, which is how long it probably took you to be able to learn how to type unconsciously, to the point where you're doing it becomes second nature, to the point where you know how to drive. Maybe 21 to 30 days of practicing each day, you kind of do it and you don't think about it. Learning to tie your shoes and so on. Ride a bike, 21 days. So the idea here is, that's why our reading program was done over the course of 5 weeks to cover that time frame. But if you miss some days in between, then just get back on your bike and practice, right? You want to do it consistently, because I told you when we started the program, I tell you it's going to take effort, and but the good news is it probably won't take as much as most people think. Just doing it consistently is what gives you the results. And doesn't that give you a certain level of satisfaction, going back to the motivation and the drive? People talk about discipline as sometimes as it's something that it's like a jailer, if you will. It's something like a chain around their body that they just have to do because they're such a creative, free spirit. And I have to admit, I value my freedom. I value my creativity. I'm a creator. My right brain is always going. But I look at discipline as being the opposite of being in prison. I see discipline as something that actually frees me, because I see not being able to do something, being stuck procrastinating, or being stuck or being enabled or not empowered to do something. I feel like that's a jail. And so discipline for me is ultimate freedom, getting myself to do something like for the most part, I like to read. 2 things I like to do, for example, is I like to read and I like to run, each day. I like to do something physical, and I like to do something mental, and that's a discipline, but I hope it shows up in the condition of my mind and my body, as an example. Now, I'm obviously not a peak athlete, because I haven't held that standard for myself, or ingrained those kind of habits, or pushed myself beyond, and so those are areas of growth. So you kind of see the results, of people, in their level of forgetfulness, or the ability to read, or their physical body. The challenge though with the brain is you really can't see it. unless you're doing like, brain scans and stuff. So to answer the question, yes, you could practice for more than 21 days. You could practice for weeks, for months, and you should be able to get quicker, but you have to be practicing and stretching yourself though. You have to exercise beyond the practice. Get yourself to do something. Your mind is like a muscle, grows stronger with use. It also gets weaker with use. It atrophies, as we know, in terms of blood flow and connections. But when you're going and doing the 4, 3, 2, 1 and the different exercises that are in this program, push yourself. Get yourself to do more. And as your body grows, so does your brain grows through the same kind of conditioning. So, and just remember, like, if you really want to become like the levels of learning. First you have the first level again is unconscious incompetent. That's where you just don't know how to do something. But the second level of learning something is conscious uncompetent. Sorry. The second level of learning something is conscious incompetence. That means you don't know how to do something. Like, a lot of people don't realize quick reading is even possible. But then when they learn about it, that it's possible, then they become consciously incompetent. They know they can't do it. The third level of learning is the level of conscious competence, and that's really the big growth right there, conscious competence. And that's where a lot of people are right now, even with the program. They can read faster, but it takes their conscious, focus and attention to it. It's kind of like somebody learns how to tie their shoe or drive. They can do it, but they have to focus on it. The fourth level of learning becomes unconscious competence, and that's where you get to second nature. That's where you get to the point where maybe you've exceeded the 21, 30 days and it becomes a habit where you don't have to be thinking about quick reading. You're just doing it, right? And that's the hope for everyone in this program as a base minimum. And but in order to get to the next level, let's say there's a fifth level, and I was just having this conversation for Circles of Genius with Don Miguel Ruiz, and if the name sounds familiar, you might have heard it from Oprah, or he's got a number of best-selling books, New York Times best-selling books, and I recommend his book all the time, a very famous book that you might have read or have on the shelf, and you should read it. A great book to practice with, called The Four Agreements. The Four Agreements, and so that book has been sold in the United States over 7 million copies. It's translated in over 35 different languages. I was having the conversation with them about the Fifth Agreement, that came out even more recently. And the Fifth Agreement is, in the whole book series is amazing. It's it's taking someone from victim to an artist. And I don't mean like a painter artist, although that's one form of it. An artist is someone who's honestly expressing themselves in the world. And the fifth agreement, though, has to do with mastery. And we're having that conversation in our Circles of Genius program. And I'm going to put probably this book and make it part of like our quick reading book club, if you will. But mastery is really the fifth level. Once you go from unconscious competence, where do you go from there is probably the level of an expert, of a master, if you will. And I don't subscribe to like necessarily a lot of. I mean, it's strange. People talk about gurus or masters or experts or authorities. I think you are ultimately the expert, because you better than anybody else. Not always the person on stage or on the phone or the writes the book, but you're an expert. That's why our superhero program, the live events that we do, Superhero You, it's about you. It's not going outside and waiting for some, superpower, alien with a cape flying around to save you. It's like you have the power inside of you. But it's, of course, get mentors, and so Circles of Genius, for example, we interview people that have unbelievable levels of genius, and again, not IQ, but people who could just get great results, and the people that they share their knowledge and their wisdom and their advice with, are able to get, great results as well. But that's the level of mastery, and if you subscribe to what it takes from there, it ranges depending on what you kind of buy into. One of the most famous books that report on it is a book called Blink, right, by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours to become a real master at your craft, a real master of your industry. If you break down 10,000 hours, if somebody's doing just very simple math, if someone's doing 20 hours a week of practice for their industry or for their career or what have you. 20 hours a week times 50 weeks a year, for example, is 1,000. 1,000 hours. So that would take 10 years, to be able to become a master of it, for example. And so the challenge is a lot of times, when you look at people get certain results, sometimes they have, they say, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but somebody could say that they have 20 years of experience, but maybe they have 1 year of experience 20 times. Going back to what we're talking about in terms of practice. Because if you're practicing the same things over and over again and you're not pushing yourself and improving those strategies, enhancing the process, then you're just kind of like typing with 2 fingers, right? And so you just kind of get as good as you could get, within the confines of that strategy. So again, to repeat the answer for this, yes, of course you could improve over past 21 days and become even quicker, even smarter, even better, even more powerful in it. And the hope is we could do it together. And so definitely, practice makes progress. Practice makes permanent. And so I think we're wrapping up here because we've been on this for a while, and I'll continue to answer questions within the program and such. And I just want to just kind of repeat the assignment here. Where we left off is do your speed practice 4, 3, 2, 1. Test yourself for 1 minute. I want you to read for 5 minutes after that, and then record and take notes. Remember the 4 W's that we talk about in the program. And then relate. Talk to people for a few minutes about what you just read. Remember, you're reading, recording, or relating to people. And then continue reading and enjoying it, and then chart your progress, because in order to be able to manage something, you have to be able to measure it. So here's your opportunity to do that. And then I would also practice your map and going back to your notes. You know what that is, if you've gone through it. And again, review session 5 and the bonus session 6, which is the review, which goes through many more intricacies that are here. But this is, in general, but specifically going through, the pillars of power and all that information that we went through, in the entire program. And it's, of course, just like I open this program about, I reread books all the time, because I know I'm going to get something more out of it and getting gems out of it. And I'll notice if I'm highlighting it, for example, I'll highlight new things, with a new color. And I'll notice like, wow, I didn't see that the first time. It's like maybe I wasn't paying attention, or maybe I'm different, in terms of my outcome, in terms of what I'm looking for. And, we talked about that in the quick reading program. So I want to congratulate you and encourage you to make sure that this is not the end. This is always the beginning, because I don't even believe in mastery to an extent. I believe that we're always going to be students, and I appreciate you being here with you. Our vision with quick learning and with Circles of Genius, with Superhero You, is to positively impact and help be part of the process to impact and unleash 1 billion brains. 1 billion brains, but we can't do it alone. And so, we believe that we have a superhero team here, that includes you as part of our learning family. And remember, team, it's together, everyone achieves more. And, I appreciate that you're committed, that you're still listening to my voice and allowing me to kind of be your coach and, your friend along the way. So until we chat again, I wish you, again, your days be full of lots of love, lots of life, lots of laughter, and of course, lots of learning. Take care.